Could you explain a little more what Sharia is?
Well, Sharia comes from a word in Arabic that derives from what Shara and Shara, and which is...
It's Sharia, originally the path to water.
And it comes to...
Sharia means a street in modern Arabic.
So something leading to something.
It's like a path.
And it just means Islamic law, and simply it derives, it should be derives from the Quran, and then the Sunnah, and then if, the topic under investigation is not found in either, then there are steps to be taken, to derive the law. And it has to be done by a scholar. And I guess we'll leave it to the scholar to talk some more. So.
Well, it's just that the law is not codified. And so having no code, it simply exists in piles and piles and piles of law books that have been written continuously since the 2nd century of Islam up until now, and have become enormously big. Although, if you think of our law books and our law libraries and our case law, it's probably much bigger than all the books of Sharia. But the books of Sharia are nevertheless hugely gigantic. And some of them are, major compendia that are as big as, say, an encyclopedia like the Encyclopedia Britannica written by one scholar. But most of them are smaller compendia than that, but they might be a multi-volume set. And in medieval times, maybe continuing even until now in some sense, but especially in medieval times, it was kind of like a doctoral dissertation for the Sharia expert to write his own book. And these books, when you study them carefully, although they do plagiarize material occasionally from others, they normally don't. Usually they cite the other sources and they mix them all together in new mixes, which produce new results. So you can find all kinds of odd ends that are in conflict with what the other books say, even in the same school of thought. And that gives a great deal of breadth and flexibility on the one hand, which is welcome. But on the other hand, it also gives the scholars, when rendering decisions, a considerable freedom of scope of action that is meant to be eliminated by something like the Code Napoleon, the French codification of law, where you just put out a law code and that's that. And the idea of eliminating difference and mashing difference. And our own American legal system is more resemblant of the Sharia and less of the Code Napoleon because of our multiple overlapping jurisdictions, our case law and precedents, and the complexity of it resembles the Sharia more, I would say.
And then the fiqh comes in, which is like the explanation or the interpretation of the
Sharia.
Sharia.
Technically fiqh, which means jurisprudence, means understanding, and that sometimes is used as a synonym for Sharia, but other times it refers more to the process of understanding or arriving at the decision, whereas the Sharia represents the legal decision itself in theory.
And then from those, of course, come the scary word fatwa, which, the first time I heard in here was in 1989, when Salman Rushdie wrote a book, and then Iran issued a fatwa that if anybody gets him, they'll pay them $1 million, which was lots of money at that time. So the word fatwa starts to be associated with violent acts and death threats and so on, but fatwa simply means an opinion, an educated opinion, somebody issuing
well, and see,
ruling on the topic.
Right, and see, in old Islam, in the old days, when people were less mobile than they are now, there would be a prevalent school of thought in a particular city and sort of a pecking order amongst the authorities, and the corporation of the ulama, who had all trained the same way through the same sheikhs and so on, would usually validate someone's opinion over someone else's, so there'd be some coherence to that. Now everything is in touch with everything else, and they're just colossal crisis of authority and confusion in that respect. Even so, in the past, Muḥammad Awađ, the cantankerous and crusty Maliki Mufti and Sheikh of Egypt, who lived from 1802 to 1882, substantial time ago, issued a judicial ruling when the question was if somebody had hidden his son in his house to avoid conscription and then lied to the government by saying, if I'm lying, my wife is divorced, is his wife really divorced or not? Because he's protecting his son from military conscription. And I don't remember which side of that Muḥammad Awađ came down on. I think he came down on the side that, yes, the wife is really divorced. And that created a big crisis in the country, sometime maybe in the 1850s or so, where that was strenuously opposed by others. And the council was held in the citadel, and Muḥammad Awađ was stripped of his power to issue fatwas and so on, even at that time, which is 150 years ago. So that could be a hot issue in those days, too. As for the variety of Sharia rulings, take something like abortion, for example. The Mufti of Jordan ruled that abortion is legal through the fourth month based on a certain hadith, which says that the soul is blown into the fetus at the after 120 days. So up to 120 days, abortion is permissible, he said. Whereas the ruling of Saudi Arabia is not only is abortion completely prohibited and not allowed at all, but birth control isn't allowed either.
Yeah, but then in reality, women in Saudi Arabia, I've seen them go to the pharmacy and say, could you give me the shot now? And they do give them contraceptive shots.
Well, that's right. But because the religious rulings don't always go. But I'm just trying to say there's such a variety of religious ruling as that, like complete contradiction. Yep. And so you can find people all over the place on the issue of abortion. And there's nothing like the tendency among a major press of evangelical Christians here to be particularly anti-abortion and to make that like their hot button issue that is, even a general litmus test for being okay with it or something. There's more variety in Islam on that issue. And I'm not saying that conservative Muslims wouldn't have other issues where they'd, be more united, but not on that issue.